Hi, I'm Tom Stevenson and welcome to Project Management Tips. Today we're going to be combining MS Project with Project Management Tips. What I wanted to come across today with is, because I've been doing a lot of videos lately on MS Project, and today I want to kind of bring in some of the project management aspect and some lean principles as well into more effectively scheduling your projects. And this will work no matter what type of project you're doing. I'm going to use, of course, construction, being a professor of construction management, as my example, but it really is about thinking in terms of project flow. It's thinking about in terms of space, and it's thinking in terms of overall sequencing and duration of your project. So what I've done here is in Microsoft Project, I just used the drawing tools to quickly draw out what I would phrase as being 10 footings. Okay, so think we've got this big site plan and we've got 10 footings that we're going to install. Now, very often in projects, what happens is an excavation contractor wants the whole entire space, all right? Because everybody wants more space because it makes things a little bit easier for them. But the reality is they don't always need that extra space. And so right now they're saying that they would want that whole entire space. And we're going to go about putting together a schedule based on them having that entire space. So I'm just going to jump now, but before I jump, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 footings. Okay, so we're going to just jump over up to different scenarios that I've run that the schedule can have. All right, and this first example, I put together excavate 10 footing pads, install rebar for 10 footing pads. Okay, so I clicked on this. This is basically the driver for the next one, which is install 10 rebar footing pads. And what this means essentially is they have to do all 10 of them before we can start to install the rebar in the following 10, right? And so that means it's going to take 20 days to complete using this scenario. So if we're planning, we should be thinking about the sequence that's going to be most effective for us to have a reasonable overall duration, but also to implement the work. So you might be listening and you're thinking about that, and okay, so you get this space, and then all right, so now the next trade's going to come in, the rebar sub, and they're going to take up that space to install their footing pads, and they'll have all that space. But looking at the time, that's pretty long, and you're like, wow, that's going to take too long. That's not going to work for us. So you might want to try a different scenario. So in scenario 2, what we want to do is we want to break that up. Remember, I had those 10 footing pads, and we want to do 2 at a time. So we want to excavate 2, and then we want to form 2. And so what's going to happen is that excavation sub is still going to be there 10 working days, right? That hasn't changed, right? So we see this here. That's showing as 10, as basically 10 working days up here. And then what we're doing is breaking it up into smaller batches, right? Smaller batch size. We're breaking it up into zones. And by breaking it up into zones, then we're going to actually greatly shorten the overall time to complete. So you can sort of see what's going to happen here is that basically this activity, when it finishes, it's going to basically allow for the rebar to start to be installed. And then they're going to go on and they're going to do the next 2, the next 2, the next 2, the next 2. So if you look up here, the time that the excavation sub is going to be on site is no different than the first case scenario. Now, do they have that whole space to work in? No. Do they need that whole space to work in? This is something like in a construction project, which is very physical and space oriented, you have to make a determination on. But very often I'm telling you that trades will want more space than they actually need. Does this take more coordination? Yes. Is this getting closer to what we call line of balance scheduling? Is this getting closer to what we call tact planning? Yes. Is this shortening your overall duration? Yes. And this can be a very, very effective way to run your schedules and to think about things. Whatever it may be, you've got to be thinking about, well, what is the most appropriate batch size for this work? Clearly, this is going to save a dramatic amount of time. We're going from 20 days to 12 days to complete. We're not asking either trade to do it in a shorter amount of time. Okay, so that's pretty good. And you might think, well, that's really good actually. And you might get in your minds to think, okay, well, if we want to do it in batches of 2, what's to say we couldn't do it in batches of 1? Well, then you see when you're looking at it, okay, if we go to a batch of 1, it's not got the same kind of savings that you had going from batches of 10 to batches of 2, but from 2 to 1, you save a day. Not that much. And so then you really got to look at it, is this worth it? Is this worth it working so close? Is this a safety issue? In construction, we worry a lot about safety. So if you've got equipment in there, it might be a safety issue. And you have to coordinate that, and you're probably saying, that's not going to really work for us. So maybe you say, well, it was worth looking at, but it's not something that we want to do. And even maybe when you're looking at the scenario that I showed with the batch of 2, maybe you want to go to batch of 5, because maybe a batch of 5 is better than the batch of 2 because of space. Well, what's the difference between the batch of 5 and the batch of 10? You're saving still 25% on your time by going to a batch of 5. So then that's where your decision comes in. What is best for this project, right? Determining the appropriate batch size. Like if I go down here and we look at this, well, you might decide, okay, we could do batches of 2, but maybe we don't do it like in sequence, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 batches. Maybe we do it 1, 2, or 1, leave a space, 2, leave a space, 3, then you basically come back here, 4, 5. So you're actually giving yourself a double space all the time. That could be a consideration if it's about having a little bit more space. That would make a big difference perhaps in a lot of scenarios. So you got to be thinking about space. You've got to be thinking about flow. Now, what's another thing that's a huge advantage that we don't even think about, that most people, when I teach this with very experienced site supers and project managers, I say, well, what's another big opportunity by doing this? So think about that. Where's another big opportunity come in by doing it this way or this way as opposed to that way? Well, then the next question I usually ask is, if you do it this way and you do something wrong, like maybe it wasn't excavated big enough, or maybe it wasn't excavated deep enough, when are you going to find out? You're going to find out after all 10 are done. Basically when that forming crew comes up and they're going to say, it's not big enough or it's not deep enough. And now what do you have to do? You have to fix 10 of them. What's going to happen if you use this methodology? When are you going to find out? You're going to find out after you do 2. The feedback's going to come back and it's going to basically say after 2, what's going on here, right? So this is the driver here, right? For these other ones. You're going to find out after you finish those 2 that basically they weren't deep enough. So how many you got to fix? 2. 2 instead of 10. I think that's huge, right? That's giving you a much quicker feedback loop so that if you do make an error somewhere, then it's quicker feedback. Anytime that you can get quicker feedback, you're learning. If there was something minor, you're tweaking it, you're learning, and you're getting better as you go. Here, it's like we're done, and now we got to go back and we got to fix them all. That's not great. So you always have to think about the feedback loop, and if we can shorten the feedback loop, that's going to be great. If we can shorten the batch size, because the other thing is, how much work in process do we have when we do this, right, as compared to this, right? We have a lot less work in process. Using smaller batches means a lot less work in process. This is huge savings. They understand this in production home building, right? We should understand it better in everything that we're doing. There's these opportunities that are lying around everywhere. I'll give you another example. So I'm writing a textbook, a new edition for my, you can see all the little yellow colorings here and post it. So I'm writing a new edition for my textbook on print reading. And the publisher, we're very tight on time because I'm switching publishers, and one publisher purchased the book from another. And they were looking at, well, it's going to be very tight in the timelines. And I said, well, how are you thinking of doing this? Well, there's 16 chapters. Well, when you finish your first draft on all 16 chapters, then we'll start the copy edits. And once we have the copy edits, we'll do the permissions, etc. And I said, no, let's not do it that way. Let's do it in small batches. All right, so let's do a chapter as one batch. I give you the chapter, you start basically the copy edits on that. And it dramatically shortens the overall schedule. And we get the permissions done as the early batches are being done overall. And so that means also, because my experience in the past is you do all this work and then permissions comes back and says you can't use this image, you can't use that image. You got all this rework. It's not any different than this. So this is what I'm saying. You can use this in anything, right? It doesn't just have to be in construction. It doesn't have to be only in the physical part of construction. It can be in part of the design process. It can be part of the planning process. It doesn't always have to only be in the execution process. Like, I mean, the book example I'm just giving you, you've got small batches. They're working on the copy edits for each chapter as it goes along. They're not waiting till they got 16 and then they got all of this ton of work to do, which is going to basically double the schedule. So this is, I use it all the time in everything I do. I look at how can we make the batches smaller to improve the flow, right? Much, much better, much less stressful. Quicker feedback. Like, I've already been getting feedback on the copy edits for the various chapters. This works wonderfully well. And so I would strongly advise looking at this in everything that you do and then deciding, because it's like, all right, well, no, he's out to lunch. That's too close. What's he thinking? Okay, well, batches of 5. Still 25% savings. But I think this one would work, basically coordinating. Do 1 and 3, do the second one, do the last one, do the second, do the fourth, and basically you're still got lots of space. So I'm Tom Stevenson, hoping this has given you some ideas to think about in your projects going forward and how this flows. Now, if you've been new to my channel, please check the playlist. You'll see that there's hundreds of videos in construction project management, in project management, Microsoft Project, and I hope that there's playlists that will help you improve yourself from wherever you are. I'm hoping you have a wonderful day, and don't forget to click subscribe, thumbs up, comments are always appreciated. Bye for now.